The rooftop food hall glittered with strings of amber bulbs, their light trembling in the evening wind. Music pulsed faintly from hidden speakers, and the air smelled of fried noodles, grilled meat, and cilantro. Long communal tables overflowed with couples leaning close, co-workers sharing beers, tourists snapping photos of the skyline. It should have been alive with warmth and possibility. But Nora Blake sat rigid in her chair, wheels locked beneath the table, watching her blind date hold up his phone at an angle that framed them both. His grin was wide, rehearsed for the audience watching through the little glowing screen. "Look at this, guys," he said, voice pitched to perform. "CEO material, huh? No one told me I was signing up for." "Well, you see it." A pause, then laughter. Not from her, not even from him, but from invisible people flooding the comments he scrolled through between sentences. His thumb flicked fast, eyes never lingering on her except to gesture like she was part of the bit. Nora forced herself to breathe evenly, her fingers curling around the condensation of her untouched soda. The glass slipped slightly under her grip, and she steadied it, willing her hand to be still. First, she told herself, ignore it. Let him talk, let the stream pass. She had endured worse. The city taught armor early, and hers had been forged in boardrooms where men twice her age underestimated her daily. But then she noticed the shift in the room. Not just the glow of his phone, but others. A whisper spread down the row of tables. A hand lifted. Someone pointed. A pair of women exchanged glances, one of them mouthing something like, "Is that her?" Recognition sharpened in the air like broken glass. She caught fragments. "That's Nora Blake, right? The biotech one? The girl genius." Except they weren't saying it with admiration. They were staring, watching her try not to flinch, watching the stream that reduced her to a punchline. Her throat burned. She reached down, fingers brushing her bag, desperate for something. Escape, invisibility, dignity. She felt the weight of every gaze on her, and for the first time in years, she wanted to disappear entirely. He had no business being where the city's polished crowd gathered. Jack Carter smelled faintly of motor oil and rain. His jacket carried the permanent scent of a garage bay and old leather. He'd come up for the skyline, for the cheap tacos at one of the stands, and because his friend had dared him to try a blind date app once. He had not expected to be in the middle of other people's cruelty. He saw Nora before he knew her name, recognized the slight, practiced tension in someone used to being watched. The man across from her laughed too loud, thumb flicking along a tiny rectangle of light, and a circle of amusement hardened around him like a halo. When the streamer's joke cut sharper, the room's hum shifted into a ripple of attention and Nora's shoulders tightened as if bracing for a storm. Jack let the moment settle for a beat, then stood, took 2 slow steps, and pushed through a thicket of knees and chairs. He did not shout. He did not engage with the streamer. He approached Nora's chair with the quiet surety of someone who shifted engines and transmission gears without looking. He placed his palm on the handrail of her chair, not overbearing, but steady, solid. "She deserves better," he said, voice low and uncomplicated. The words were not an order. They were a hinge that quieted the room. Headlines of laughter faltered. A few people turned. The stream dwindled into awkward typing and then silence. The man with the phone blinked as if a wind had blown through him. The joke had lost its audience. Someone muttered, "Embarrassed." Someone scrolled away. Nora's breath hitched. She had rehearsed responses for boardroom slights, for investors who called her boss lady, with a smile that meant less than it sounded. She had rehearsed legal retorts and the measured calm of a CEO. She had not rehearsed for this, for a stranger's uncomplicated defense delivered like a hammer to a brittle glass. She expected spectacle next, another punchline, another streamed gag. Instead, Jack offered something small and unperformative. "Can I help you get out of here?" No flourish, no camera-ready line. His eyes were steady, the only color in them the honest blue of a late shift sky. The offer was ordinary in the way kindness often is, unadorned, immediate, practical. Nora felt a skepticism she had trained as armor, a suspicion for every hand extended. She pictured the comments that would follow, the polite followers sharing the clip with cruel captions. She braced for pity. But when Jack slid his hand behind her chair and guided it gently forward, there was no pity in the gesture. He rolled her toward the exit like someone steering a car through a rain-slick street, careful, competent, respectful. The city noise folded back around them. As they passed the rows of strangers, Nora's shoulders eased by fractions she almost missed. The humiliation didn't vanish, but the space between the ache and the air around it widened, giving room where none had been before. They reached the stairwell and the rooftop doors breathed open to the night. Jack kept his hand light on her chair, a promise that someone was watching over the small, strange dismantling of her dignity. She turned her head once to look at him properly, and for a moment the world narrowed to the two of them. A woman who had built empires and a mechanic who fixed engines the way he steadied people, with hands that knew exactly how much pressure to use. "Thank you," she said, the words simple, but not hollow. He only nodded, as if the act required no explanation. Outside, the night pressed down heavy, a hush after the rooftop noise. Nora felt the city's pulse but not its comfort. Neon signs flickered across wet pavement, and the sharp scent of rain lingered. She should have been rushing away alone, disappearing into a cab or down a side street, armor back in place. Instead, there was this man. Grease under his nails, denim jacket worn thin, hand still steady on her chair. Her instinct braced for the next blow. Pity, or worse, another joke dressed as kindness. She kept her eyes on the uneven concrete, her voice a brittle whisper. "You don't have to." "I know," Jack said simply. His tone carried no weight of obligation, no sweetness designed to soothe, just fact. They reached the elevator lobby, its walls humming faintly, reflecting distorted versions of their faces. Nora studied his reflection, waiting for the smirk, the camera, the twist. But Jack only pressed the button, stood a little behind her chair, and let silence do the work. When the doors slid open, the small space filled with fluorescent light. She wheeled in, half expecting him to stop at the threshold. Instead, he stepped inside, leaning against the rail as though it were the most natural place to be. No exaggerated gallantry, no look of triumph for rescuing the fallen CEO. Halfway down, she finally turned her head. "Why did you do that? Back there?" Jack's shrug was slow, almost reluctant. "Because you didn't deserve what he did. Didn't seem right watching it happen." The words were so plain they unsettled her more than any performance could. No pitch, no angle, just raw decency that didn't ask for anything in return. Nora blinked hard, fighting the sting in her eyes. She wanted to answer with poise, with some rehearsed gratitude, but all she managed was a quiet, "Thank you." Jack gave the barest nod. The elevator doors parted, spilling them into the ground floor where the city's roar waited. The moment should have ended there. A stranger's defense, a kind exit, and nothing more. Yet when the automatic doors opened to the wet night, Jack didn't step away. "Let me walk you out," he said, not as a request but as a steady offer. And for the first time that evening, Nora felt something shift inside her. Not relief, not yet trust, but the fragile edge of belief that maybe, just maybe, kindness could still be real. The rooftop's glow receded behind them, swallowed by the hum of traffic and the low buzz of neon signs. Nora wheeled herself along the sidewalk while Jack walked at her side, hands tucked into his jacket pockets, his stride unhurried to match hers. For once she didn't feel slowed down. He adjusted without comment, like it was the most natural thing in the world. The rain had thinned to a mist, leaving the streets slick and alive with reflections. Somewhere down the block, music throbbed from a basement bar, laughter spilling into the night air. But just ahead, beneath a glowing red and green sign, stood a taco truck, paint chipped, the window framed with yellow bulbs. The smell of grilled carne asada and cilantro drifted out like a promise. "Hungry?" Jack asked, glancing at her. Nora almost laughed. Hunger was the last thing on her mind. Shame still churned in her chest, threatening to suffocate her. But the scent was grounding, and something in his voice, casual and even, made it hard to refuse. "Maybe a little," she admitted. They rolled up together, joining a short line of late-night wanderers. College kids with backpacks, a couple in thrift store jackets, a delivery cyclist balancing his helmet under one arm. No one stared at her here. No one whispered her name. She was just another customer, waiting for tacos on a wet Friday night. The ordinariness of it eased her shoulders. Jack ordered without fuss. 2 carne asada, 2 El Pastor. He paid in cash, sliding a few crumpled bills across the counter. When Nora reached for her wallet, he shook his head. "Don't worry about it. My treat." "I can pay," she said, the old reflex sharp. "I know," he answered softly. "Still my treat." There was no power play in his tone, no performance. Just a mechanic with grease still under his nails, buying tacos because he wanted to. They found a narrow ledge beneath the truck's awning, balancing paper trays between them. The tortillas were warm, the salsa bright with lime. Nora took a bite, the flavors sparking against her tongue, and realized how long it had been since she'd eaten without rushing, without thinking about her next meeting or how she looked in public. A bead of sauce slipped from the tortilla, splattering across her suede shoe. She froze, humiliated again, expecting a wince, a joke. But Jack simply crouched without hesitation, pulling a rag from his back pocket. He dabbed at the stain carefully, as though it were the hood of a car he was restoring. "You don't have to," she began, voice tight. "Yeah," he said, glancing up briefly, his tone steady. "I know." And that was all. No comment about her chair, no exaggerated kindness, no pity. Just a small act of care, the same way he might wipe grease from his hands before picking up a wrench. When he straightened, their eyes met. The taco truck's neon washed his face in green and red, softening the lines of weariness around his eyes. She felt the unfamiliar weight of trust pressing against her ribs. They ate in silence for a while, the city alive around them, cabs hissing by, laughter echoing from a distant street corner, the soft hum of the generator keeping the taco truck lit. For the first time since the rooftop, Nora let herself breathe. Not as a CEO forced into resilience. Not as a woman reduced to a cruel livestream clip. Just herself, eating tacos in the rain with a stranger who didn't ask her to be anything more or less. The tacos were gone. Only grease-stained paper trays left between them. The city thinned at this hour. The buzz of cars softened, conversations drifted further apart. They moved on, side by side, Nora's wheels clicking softly against uneven pavement, Jack matching his steps to her rhythm as though he'd been doing it for years. They wandered without purpose, past shuttered storefronts and graffiti-tagged walls, until they found themselves near a small park bordered by iron fencing. The lamps inside glowed amber, halos caught in the mist. Jack pushed open the gate and waited, holding it steady as Nora wheeled through. She noticed he didn't hover or fuss, just gave her space the way one might with a friend. They stopped at a bench facing a quiet fountain, its trickle muted under the night. For a long moment neither spoke. The silence wasn't uncomfortable. It was the kind of silence that waited, patient and steady, for the right words to surface. Finally, Nora broke it. "I don't usually let people step in like that. Tonight." Her voice was low, almost lost in the mist. "I've spent years building armor, and still one stupid live stream and I felt—" She trailed off, jaw tightening. "Exposed?" Jack asked gently. Her eyes flicked toward him, surprised. "Yes." He nodded as if he knew the word not just in theory, but in practice. He leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees, hands clasped loosely. "People think strength is never bending, but it's just knowing how much you can carry before you set something down. Doesn't mean you're weak. Means you're human." The simplicity of it unsettled her. She had been told she was an icon, a trailblazer, a fighter. Human wasn't usually part of the narrative. "And you?" she asked after a beat. "You talk like someone who's carried plenty." Jack's eyes stayed fixed on the fountain, as though the rippling water steadied him. "I dropped out of college sophomore year. My sister had a baby. Dad was gone, Mom wasn't around much. Someone had to step in. So I did." He exhaled slowly. "Thought I'd go back one day. Didn't. Turns out diapers don't wait for degrees." Nora studied him in the glow of the lamp. His hands, rough from years of work, twisted the edge of his rag absently, as if muscle memory needed something to fix. "Your sister's child?" He nodded. "Mia. She's 12 now. Smart, sharp. Smarter than me for sure. I fix cars to keep the lights on, keep her in school. Some nights it feels like I failed her, not giving her more. But then she laughs at some stupid show on TV, and I think maybe that's enough. A roof, a chance. Love." Nora's throat tightened. "You gave up your future for her." Jack shook his head. "Nah, just traded it. Different future. Not the one I planned, but the one that showed up at my door." The words struck something deep in her. She thought of boardrooms where her grief was hidden behind polished speeches, of nights she lay awake, working until her body went numb just so she wouldn't feel the absence of her mother, the silence that followed her into adulthood. Success had been her shield, the empire her proof she wasn't broken. But sitting here, listening to him speak of trade-offs and quiet sacrifices, she felt the weight of everything she had buried. "I lost my mom when I was 19, Nora said quietly. "She was everything. And after she was gone, I just worked. And worked. Built a company before I knew who I was without her. People call me relentless, brilliant." Her voice caught. "But most days I think I'm just running from the silence." Jack finally turned to her, and for a moment their eyes held. His carrying the quiet exhaustion of years lived for someone else, hers carrying the sharp loneliness of building a fortress no one could enter. And in that fragile recognition, they saw not pity, not judgment, but the strength behind scars. The mist thickened around them, softening the edges of the park, wrapping the bench in a cocoon of quiet. Neither of them rushed to fill it. For once, the silence between them felt less like absence, more like understanding. The weeks that followed blurred into something fragile, almost ordinary. Jack and Nora found small rituals: coffee at the corner shop before his morning shift, late-night calls when her board meetings left her restless. For the first time in years, she allowed someone close enough to see her tiredness, her laughter, her silence. But closeness carried its own danger. Her father noticed. One evening, as Jack locked up the garage, two men in dark suits stood waiting by the gate. Their polished shoes looked wrong against the oil-stained concrete. One spoke in a voice clipped and polite, but edged with threat. "Mr. Carter, you're a decent man, but Miss Blake deserves protection you can't give. Consider this a warning. Step aside." Jack's jaw tightened. He could fix engines, rebuild broken transmissions, but he couldn't fight an empire with guards and lawyers. And if he didn't step back, they'd turn their weight on Mia too. So the next night, when Nora wheeled into the cafe with that faint smile reserved only for him, Jack forced the lie out. "I can't do this anymore. I met someone else." He didn't look at her when he said it. Couldn't. Nora's chest hollowed. For a moment she thought she'd misheard. Then the words landed fully, sharp and merciless. She left without reply, the cafe's hum fading behind her. The city broke open that night with rain, sheets of it hammering the pavement. Nora wheeled through the storm, hair plastered to her face, her hands slipping on wet rims. She didn't care where she went. The humiliation from weeks ago felt small compared to this betrayal carved by the one person she had started to trust. Headlights cut through the downpour. A car skidded too close, horn blaring. She froze, chair jolting against the curb. And then a hand seized hers, strong and familiar, pulling her back just as the car splashed past. Jack, soaked, breathless, his eyes raw with something he hadn't let her see before. "I lied," he said hoarsely. Rain streamed down his face, mingling with tears he didn't hide. "It wasn't someone else. It was your father. He told me to leave you. I thought I could protect you by walking away, but I can't. I can't." Nora's heart hammered, torn between fury and relief. The rain softened nothing, but in his voice she heard the truth, stripped bare. For the first time in weeks, she let herself reach for his hand. Not out of fear, but out of something closer to defiance. The storm broke the next morning into a brittle Texas sun. Nora Blake wheeled through the marble halls of her father's Dallas estate, water still heavy in her hair, Jack walking a step behind her. The air smelled of polished wood and money, cold and sharp. Her father was waiting in the study, flanked by men in suits. His silver watch gleamed as he clasped his hands, the gesture as much a weapon as his words. "Nora, this man, he's not your equal. He'll drag you down." For years, she had bent beneath his will, the pressure to lead, to prove herself flawless, to protect the empire he'd built. But last night's rain still clung to her skin, a reminder of what nearly slipped away. "I'd rather fall with him," she said quietly, her voice steady, "than rise alone under you." Her father's eyes narrowed. "You'd give up everything for a mechanic?" She lifted her chin. "I'd give up an empire before I'd give up love." The silence that followed was heavy, but not crushing. For once, she didn't feel small in his shadow. She turned her chair, Jack's hand steady at her back, and left the estate without looking back. Months later, The sound of gulls replaced boardroom chatter. A garage near the coast had been dressed in flowers and mismatched chairs. Friends, neighbors, a few stunned colleagues gathered under the open sky. Nora wore a simple dress, Jack a suit that didn't quite hide the grease at his cuffs. After the vows, he wheeled her down a sandy path toward the ocean. At the edge he steadied her, guiding her to stand. Bare feet touched the cool grains, trembling but free. She took a step, then another, her hand tight in his. The surf roared like applause. Jack kissed her temple, whispering something only she could hear. And there, on that strip of sand, Nora Blake, CEO, survivor, daughter, wife, felt something she hadn't in years. Not victory, not defiance. Peace.